I think it's a really weird balancing act of a piece, and probably all of the durationals are like that, in the sense that at any given moment you might have intentions, you might have ambitions to push it in this way or to hit it in that way or to get the other person, but all the time as well the room has its own energy and its own time, and you can't always do your fantasy of what this should be, and the other person of course is not a cooperative person. They might be fighting you and trying to drag it in another direction. You're feeling for each other a little bit, but I think what it means is that you're always in a kind of an in-between of many different things, and that's what's live. Your ambitions are pathetic, like because you want it to be like this. You have an idea that it could be like that, and actually the great thing is that won't work, and you're forced to admit that it won't work. That means you have to accept and live with and work with what is. So I think it's a really weird thing between ego and humility wins, or the room wins. The energy of the room, the energy of your interaction with the other person, those things win. And if you think that you're going to be very clever or whatever, this doesn't always work out. It does sometimes, but mostly you end up, tripping over your own shoelaces, which is, I think that's a nice thing about it, actually. Joking is really important to it. I mean, they're clowns. And if they're not doing a great big slapstick routine, it's only because, in a sense, that's in the background. I always think of it as a kind of residue of some act, residue of some relation, of adversarial comedy. They hate each other. They're forced to spend hours and hours and hours with each other. They rely on each other, which is another cause for hate or distrust. So there's a rivalry, there's all sorts of this kind of energy that goes with clowning and with slapstick. And joking comes out of that, I think. And there's this sort of pressure, I suppose, inherent in that to make it something, to go somewhere with that clowning thing and to make it funny. I think as well the comic thing can be a kind of place to hide, that it's sort of easier to be flippantly funny or kind of stupid than it is to give a proper answer. And yes, of course, in the tiredness there's also a kind of hysteria and a kind of edge to that things run out of control, and you're not really in control. So even if you're trying to be sensible now, you find yourself laughing. You find there's a giddy kind of out of controlness to it that's not in your grasp. I mean, I like that side of it, and I like that it gets really out of control. But I also like fighting the impulse to the comic in it. So I'm very blocking at certain points about questions about sex or sort of body depravity and so on, because after a certain time you just think, I can't hear any more of that. It is funny and it will make people in the room laugh, but actually, so what? So I think there's also a search maybe to push through that hysteria to another thing, and I think for me that's what's most interesting, maybe about that relation between that multiplying comical sort of energy, and on the other hand what happens when that crashes and you end up in these crashed spaces where suddenly you can ask a really simple question. Like, I remember asking Richard, what's the hardest thing you've ever done? And I knew that could be a heavy question, but I had no idea that it would trip Richard up to the extent that it did, or that he would throw it back to me in the way that he did. And I think maybe I offered it to him as a what's the hardest thing I've ever done. So it became a really nicely heavy moment in the piece, But it's almost like you get those because of the giddiness, because of the feeling of weightlessness and craziness. It crashes, and in that crashing is a really beautiful opportunity for something else to happen.